So one thing I'm gonna wait and I think you're good. Give me one
Okay.
sec. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
You are good. Thank you for your patience and
Okay.
thank you.
All righty. So they said I'm good to go here. So I appreciate everybody's patience. Um, Thank y'all for hanging in there while we sorted things out. So, good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever's happening where you are. My name is Debra, and I live in the foothills of the Arkansas Ozarks. And we were talking about the weather in the chat. It is sunny and in the 80s here today, which we're going to enjoy that because pretty soon it will be ridiculously hot and humid here in Arkansas. So, what I want to do today is talk to you a little bit about how you can use the energy or where you can find the energy and weather to use in your magical practice. So, what I hope you come away with today is finding out that weather magic, yes, it's about protection and storm splitting and drawing in rain and all of that, but there is more that you can add to that to make your weather magic practice more rich. And I hope that if nothing else, you get that from today's presentation. So, what I want to talk about is why did I choose to look at weather magic the way that I have? And as a physicist and as an astrophysicist in training, my intersection of my magic and my science has been happening for about, I guess, since graduate school, when I started going, oh wait, these are the same thing. Why do these need to be different? I started looking at the intersection of particularly astrophysics and my witchcraft magical practice and going, these are two sides of the same energetic coin. So we look at weather magic as something that is maybe too chaotic or too big, but I would dispute that. I would say it is something that is accessible to everybody because we all interact with the weather. So we've used weather magic. Most of us have used weather magic pretty much our entire lives, especially if you're of the generation that sat in front of the television set hoping that your school's name would appear on the little um, screen at the bottom saying that you got a snow day, right? You're sitting there with your fingers crossed and hoping that, your name would show up and it would be a snow day for you. You're hoping against hope. That's weather magic. Or if you are hoping that it's not going to rain for an outdoor concert, or you say, oh, I washed my car, I'm going to make it rain. So it's one of those things where weather magic has been used by people pretty much our entire lives. And we don't own it. So why not? Let's own it. Let's use it. So this is where my science and my witchcraft intersect. So that's why I decided to pursue this as a new idea for weather magic. So let's talk a little bit about where you can find the energy in weather. It's all over the place, right? So what I want to do is give you some science and then talk to you about how you can add that science to your magical toolkit. So when we talk about weather, the first thing we have to talk about is energy from the sun. And I'm not just trying to sneak this in here because I'm an astrophysicist. That is what is the driving force behind our weather is sunlight. So the sun comes to the earth, it passes through the atmosphere. The sunlight's either absorbed by the atmosphere or absorbed by the surfaces of the earth and in the form of thermal or heat energy. Our atmosphere, we need the atmosphere present to have weather. So our atmosphere is relatively thin compared to planets like Jupiter and Saturn. So we have weather because of our atmosphere, but those planets have amazing weather. They have storms like the Great Red Spot on Jupiter that have persisted for hundreds of years. But the atmosphere we have energy in. Then we have humidity. Now, some places have more humidity, some places have less. I live in a region where we get a lot of southerly winds from the Gulf of Mexico, so we get a lot of humidity here. But all weather needs that humidity to be able to happen. Then you have the different surfaces on the earth. We have water. The earth's mostly covered with water. We have the land surfaces. We have trees. We have cities. We have concrete. We have asphalt. We have ice caps for now. Maybe that's going to change. We hope not. But these things, all these different things, absorb that energy differently. Then we have wind as a result of the temperature differences because of these surfaces absorbing this energy differently. We get wind. Then we have cloud and storm formation. And as a result of that, we have precipitation and lightning. So these are all places where energy sort of hangs out in weather. So I want to talk in particular about a couple of them so that you can get a taste of what you can do. And then you can go off and read more about weather, whether you enjoy my book, you can get my book and read it, or you can look online at lots of different really great weather tutorial sites, and you can find places where energy is embedded in the weather. Okay, so I want to talk in particular about cloud formation to start with. So with cloud formation, the first thing that I already mentioned is the sunlight comes down to the earth, whether it comes through the atmosphere and gets absorbed or it gets absorbed by the surfaces. About 50% of the sunlight gets absorbed by the atmosphere, about 50% gets absorbed by the surfaces. Then what that does is it causes the surfaces to heat up. Water is a very good thermal insulator. We say in the vernacular of science, it has a high specific heat capacity, which means if you think of it as an energy suitcase, it's a big suitcase. It can hold a lot of energy. Whereas land, sand, soil, trees, grass, things like that, they don't hang on to heat as efficiently as water does. So their temperature can change much easier, where water's temperature is harder to change than, say, sand, for example. So when you think about the energy, think about, especially with water, there's a tremendous amount of energy stored in water. Now, even if you live in an area that's not next to an ocean or next to a large body of water, you still have water vapor accessible to you to use, because that's what humidity is. Okay, so when we talk about cloud formation, what happens is the sun's light heats up these surfaces, then that causes the air above them to heat. So when you talk about heating, there's different mechanisms to pass heat around. One of those is by direct contact, okay? And that's called conduction. One of those is by the motion of a fluid. Now, fluid means, we mostly think about fluids as something liquid, but gases are all considered fluids as well. So air is a fluid. So the surface of the earth heats, it heats the air above it. That air then, as warm air does, begins to rise, okay? Or if you have a case where you have the surface of the ocean heating, that can cause evaporation to happen off of the surface of the ocean or the surface of a lake or really any body of water. So the air begins to rise, and it has some moisture content in it. It has humidity. Now, depending on where it comes from, it has more or less. So, but there is water vapor in there. It begins to rise. As it rises up and moves higher in the atmosphere, it begins to grab onto little dirt particles or smoke particles or other particulates in the atmosphere, and the water vapor will actually condense onto those particles and make droplets. Now, where those droplets end up in the cloud determines if they're liquid droplets or if they're frozen. So when you look at a cloud and you see a cloud that looks dark, that means that's mostly liquid water. When you look at a cloud and it mostly looks white, that's ice, that's frozen water. Okay, so the cloud forms as the droplets coalesce Then as the air continues to rise, it will form the cloud form. Now, depending on what's going on in the atmosphere, it will determine the type of cloud that forms. But when you think about all of that, think about this. Think about the fact that what energy is in that cloud now? You've got sunlight, so you've got fire energy, if you want to think of it that way. You've got the convective lifting of the air, so air. You've got the moisture in the form of water vapor or liquid water or frozen water. So you've got water, and then you've got those, what those particulates are is condensation nuclei. So those are bits of dirt. So you've got earth energy. So I like the idea that in that cloud, you have all four of the elements. You have earth, air, fire, and water all in that cloud, and you have that energy to tap into. Now, what else you have is the energy from the change of the water vapor into liquid water, and then perhaps the liquid water into ice. Those are called phase changes. Okay, so phase changes are where it changes form. Now, if anybody's ever been steam scalded, you know that steam contains a whopping amount of energy. There is so much more energy in that steam just condensing and turning from steam into liquid than there is to take that hot water and cool it all the way down and freeze it. So as these phase changes occur, they release energy into that cloud form. Well, there's you some more energy that you can tap into to use in your magical practice. So the other thing that I want to think about is these clouds, when they form, depending on what's going on in the atmosphere, they form at different altitudes, and they form with different shapes, or what we call morphology. So morphology is the 50-cent word for the shape of something. So depending on where they form, I like to think of the clouds as giving me information on timing, for example. Like a very high cloud could mean whatever work that I'm trying to do is a ways out. It is a long ways off. Or it can mean I need to take a higher perspective. I need more of a bird's eye view or a overall view of a situation. Whereas low clouds may mean that thing is imminent. So if you want to do cloud scrying, and I see some people talking about cloud scrying or cloud divination in the chat, that's one way that you can incorporate that into your practice. The other thing that I like to do is use certain types of clouds when I'm doing magical working. And I'm going to specifically talk about our friend over here, the cumulonimbus cloud, because we see a lot of those where I live. So what I want to talk about there is how I can use, we're going into summertime here in Arkansas. We're getting these little afternoon heating thunderstorms that we get. If you were at Summer Magic Fest, and I know some of y'all were, we had some pretty good little afternoon and evening thunderstorms there, but they're on a timer. They have a finite lifespan. So what I like is to use those if I'm trying to time a magical working. So for example, so this is an example of the formation of a cumulonimbus cloud. And you've got liquid water because the lower part of the cloud is dark. You've got the high, beautiful, puffy top of the cloud where the frozen water is. So I like to think about those as a mechanism for timing my magic. So what I think about when I do that is I think about the energy in that storm, right? I think about all the different types of energy in that storm. So you've got the air going up, carrying the warm air going up, carrying the moisture. You've got the cold air coming down, you know, bringing down rain or possibly hail or possibly, you know, more than that, you know, tornadoes or whatever. But if you look at the storm and you start to understand the anatomy of that storm, you can pull out energy that you can use for your magical practice. So I give you a little example. Okay. So let's say this afternoon, I want to do a magical working for a success on a project at my job. Okay. Um, so I want to move a situation forward, or I want to energize a situation. So, it's not quite noon here in Arkansas. Usually the little puffy cumulus clouds start showing up around this time of day. They'll look like little piles of cotton balls or whatever you want to say in the sky, or sheep, or whatever your favorite metaphor for them is. But and I've spent enough afternoons in the hayfield baling hay to know the timing on this. Around 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they start to get a little bit taller. They start to kind of look a little more ominous. They start to look a little like, but as my dad would say, they bump together and make a bigger one. So they start to build. And what I'm watching is the afternoon heating causing convection and causing that energy to rise up, that water vapor to rise up in the atmosphere and build that cloud. Now, if you've ever watched one of these storms, or if you've experienced one, these are the storms that it's raining, down the road from your house, but not at your house, or across the road from your house and not at your house, because these storms don't tend to move around a lot. They tend to sort of rain out in one place. You can watch this storm build up. It'll form the familiar cumulonimbus shape. And then you'll see what looks like somebody's punched a hole in the bottom of it with a hole punch. And that's where the rain starts to fall down. What that does is that creates a downdraft. And that downdraft is where the rain is coming. But it's also the thing that's going to cause the ending of the storm, because the updraft is what feeds the storm. If you start cutting off the updraft, you start robbing the storm of its energy, and eventually it will literally rain itself out. You can watch that rain shaft spread over the whole bottom of the cloud as the downdraft takes over, and it'll eventually rain out the storm. So that's what I mean by timing. So I think about the energy that's in the storm. I think about, and there's different ways you can go with this. It depends on what you want to do. If I want to energize a situation, I visualize all that energy being released as I go from water vapor to liquid water and then to ice. But if you want to slow down or freeze up a situation, you can think about it in terms of that ice that's forming in the top of that storm. Either way you go is the right way, because it's your magic and you're the boss of your own magic, right? So at the end of the day, I have a timer on that storm, because that storm's going to last maybe a couple of hours, 3 hours, at the 3 or 4 hours. And I can watch that storm progress through its lifespan, and I can time my magic, whether it's candle magic or spell work or meditation or whatever I want to do on that little storm. So once the storm dissipates, the energy is released and my working is done. I don't like to leave my magical workings just kind of open-ended. I like to put timers on them, whether it's a few hours, a few days, a year, whatever. So this is a nice way to do that, and it gives you a visual timer to do that. So even if you don't live somewhere where this happens, some of y'all may be saying, well, I don't have those kind of storms where I live. Doesn't matter. We are all connected. We are all connected by the atmosphere, right? So we're all connected by this big blanket ocean of air that's over us. So you still have access to all forms of weather in your practice. So what I hope that you will see in this little short talk is that there's a ton of energy in weather. It's all over the place. So if you look at it from a scientific perspective and you identify where the weather is, you can then take that energy and add that energy to your magical practice. Because to me, energy is energy is energy. There's no special magical energy that's over here in this pile and special science energy that's over in this pile. It's all the same pile to me. It's all the same energy bank that I can tap into. So you can certainly adapt these ideas to your local weather, but you can also remember that we are connected globally by the atmosphere, so we can tap into global weather. So what I hope you get from all of this is weather magic is more than doing storm splitting, which I do plenty of, calling in rain, lightning protection, all of those things. All of those things are part of it, but there is more. There's a much richer, deeper way that you can interact with weather and use it as part of your magical practice. So thank you for being a great audience. I saw a couple of things in the chat. One of the things that I saw as it rolled by was my thoughts on climate change. Yes, it's happening, and we're a lot to do with it. I live obviously in an area that maybe is not so on board with the idea of climate change, but what I have been able to, the way I've been able to get people to listen and get invested is I live in an area where one of the biggest economic boons to this state is duck hunting. Arkansas is the duck hunting capital of the world. Ducks follow the freezing line. And in the wintertime, ducks follow the freezing line, and that's where the duck hunting is good. Well, as climate change starts happening, the duck hunting capital of the world is not getting as many ducks because they are moving further north. And so if I can make them understand that this is going to impact something that's important to them, farmers live and die by the weather, right? Especially crop farmers. And we have a huge crop farming in this state. So if I can get them to understand that if they grow crops that are susceptible to things like fungal diseases, which are more prevalent where it's warm and moist, if it's warmer, if we have problems with pests because our winters are always colder are not cold enough to kill off the pests. These are all things that hit them in the pocketbook. So if I can make them understand that it's affecting their bottom line, then they're a little bit more on board with this idea that climate change is not just some sort of, hippy dippy fantasy that to save some polar bears and things, which I'm all for saving polar bears. I love polar bears, but it's a thing, it's happening, and we can do something. We can do things about it if we act. Is it too late? I don't know, but it's worth a try, in my opinion. The name of my book is Weather, Magic, Witchery, Science, and Lore. I should have brought a copy to hold up and show you, but I'm not very good at self-promotion. It is available through Llewellyn.com, and so you can go there and find it. You can follow me on Facebook. I'm under Debra Burris, teacher, author, witch, or author, teacher, witch, or something like that on Facebook. You can follow my group. Also, I have a bone art business called Stories of the Bones. You can find me there. So thank you. Oh, hi, Rita. Thank you for saying that. You're very sweet. Okay, so I'm trying to see what the other questions were. I saw something about mood. Let's see. Let me scroll back very quickly and see. The body behavior and mood. Oh boy. Yes, I have a ankle that tells me when it's going to storm, and I also get headaches when the storm systems are particularly strong. I think that, to me, the way I use that as a forewarned is forearmed thing. Like if I know I need to get some work done and I need to know when this storm is coming, my headache's going to tell me it's on the way, right? How I deal with that, I'm going to be honest with you. I have no magical means of dealing with that headache. I take some Tylenol, but the way I look at it is it's like an omen, right? It gives me a little bit of time to prepare myself. So also, when we look at things like seasonal affective disorder, maybe if I do some meditation and I think about sunlight and sunshine, that kind of helps lift my moods in the winter time, right? Particularly when we have January, I always refer to as a cold gray bucket of suck around here because the holidays are over. It's not springtime yet, and you're just kind of sitting here in this gray, no leaves on the trees, rainy. We don't get a lot of snow and ice in Arkansas, and when we do, people panic and there's fist fights at the Piggly Wiggly over the bread and the milk, which I never understood why you wanted bread and milk. I would be getting like pizza and stuff. But anyway, you need you need something to kind of lift your spirits, right? So I often will sit and do a meditation about sunlight. um I do one about sunlight where I think about, because the sun's always there. It's just that the clouds are keeping us from seeing it. So I just sort of visualize, there's a visualization in my book where you rise up through the atmosphere. And I kind of use that one as a way to tap into the sunlight because I know it's there. It's just not getting down to the surface. So that's one way that you could use it. Another thing that I try to do when I think about, I'm really sensitive to like big storms. The big storms to me make me feel very energized, almost, to the level of like being anxious and nervous. But I look at that as a sign that I need to expel some excess energy. So I will, that's a good time as a storm is approaching for me to use that excess energy. Yeah, I never understood the whole bread and milk thing. I just don't. I mean, and I used to work at a grocery store when I was in college, and we had a snow day, and like the first two flakes of snow fell out of the sky, and it was like the scene on Third Rock from the Sun when Harry sees snows the first time, and he starts screaming about albino brain chiggers. That's kind of how people act around here. So, um, let's see, the volcanoes do affect weather, and and so do fires. They're localized weather events. Now if you have a large eruption and it affects the atmosphere like Pinatubo did, it can lower the overall temperature of the earth a couple of degrees. If you go back and read about the mini ice age that happened, and there was also a thing called the Maunder minimum, there was like this convergence of things that happened in I think it was the 1600s where they saw like a lower number of sunspots and there was a mini ice age and all these things. So that is something that does affect it. Let's see. Let's see. What is your opinion of trying to call via the relationship with Earth? I think about it less as trying to control the weather and more about working in allyship with it, right? Let's face it, I train horses too, and I'm not going to out muscle my 1,300-pound gelding. I have to work with him as an ally. So I kind of look at weather in that way. I try to think about, instead of trying to split a storm necessarily, I try to split it. And also if I can persuade it to weaken, right? I try to work with it as an ally. I realize at the end of the day, my power is probably pretty limited, but I'm going to do what I can, just like we can do what we can about global warming. And so things like that, I see it less as control and more as allyship. I saw something about canned food for power outages. Make sure you have a can opener too. Make sure you have a can opener. Ask me that now. I know that. Make sure you have a can opener, or get pop top cans. But I try to work at it is in allyship. I am I'm a physicist, so physics is sort of the umbrella of meteorology. I have taken several atmospheric physics classes and some meteorology classes. My degree is actually in astrophysics, but when you do planetary science, you need to understand a lot about weather. So I have taken multiple classes to do with that. So, a corkscrew. Yes, a corkscrew is always good when there's a power outage. But yeah, so I think for me, it's like, as I said, it's about allyship with weather, working in partnership. And that's, as a farmer, I've had to learn to do that too, because the weather is going to do what it's going to do. And I just have to try to work with it as a partner and not see it as an adversary. So, yes. So thank you. Thank you, everybody. I think I got to all the questions. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. I appreciate you. I hope you can find me on my social media. And I will look forward to talking with some of y'all at Mystic South soon and seeing some of y'all on social media. So thanks, everybody, for spending some time.